Hey everybody, thanks for taking the time to view my presentation. Today I'm going to be giving you some information about social privilege in America. A couple of things you need to know. First, I did not make this information up. This is not just my opinion. It's based on writings by several different authors in the field of social sciences, psychology, sociology, women's studies, and there are references at the end of my presentation for anyone who wants to continue to do research on this topic, or if you're the kind of person that wants to check out and see if I really know what I'm talking about. Also, for those of you who think that privilege just has to do with having money, this presentation might give you a different view on privilege, especially in our country. And I hope that my viewers are able to look at themselves the way that these authors were able to look at themselves, because it's very difficult, I know. By presenting this information, I hope to create awareness about social privilege in America and also spark some discussion and possibly healthy debate about the issue. So please comment and discuss. And I hope you all find it very interesting and informative, and I hope you enjoy. So, why talk about privilege? Well, for my class project, I chose to discuss about privilege because every time I would try to explain to friends or family what I was learning in class about privilege, they automatically became super defensive and it usually turned into an argument. And it was all because of a misunderstanding of the information, I think. So I thought it would be interesting to present information about privilege to people who don't take women's studies classes, multicultural studies classes, things like that, and who are not commonly exposed to this material. So I began by taking a poll of my Facebook friends asking how they identified privilege. So I asked if they considered themselves privileged in America or not, and why or why not. And most of the responses that I got back had to do with class, with material things like having cars or houses or phones, or having a good income, a good job. And this was usually in comparison to other people. So comments like, I have it better than this person who doesn't have a job, or I have it better than this person who's homeless and doesn't have a house. And these responses are similar to the ones that I would get from my friends and my family. Comments like, no, I'm not privileged because I had to work hard for everything that I have to get. So it seems as though the misunderstanding lies in the definition or the meaning of privilege. So, what do I mean when I talk about privilege? Social privileges. Well, I'm talking about social privileges based on group identity. Usually groups that you're born into, that you don't choose to belong to, that you're just identified as. So before we get too into it, let's take a look at some of the ideas about privilege in the social sciences. Okay, so let's take this one at a time. Privilege is a special advantage. So this means that not everyone has privilege. I mean, it wouldn't be privilege if everyone had it, right? So this is easily seen in discussions of class or money. You see people on television all the time that have fancy cars, huge houses for like two people, and you sit and watch these shows and you think to yourself, well, I'm not privileged because I don't have that much. So those rich people on television, they have a privilege in America, a social class privilege. So that it kind of explains that. Second, privilege is granted, not earned. So that means that privilege is not gained by hard work. It's basically handed to a person because of their group identity. And you don't have to do anything to belong to the group. Like, take white privilege, which we'll discuss more in a moment. In order to benefit from white privilege, you merely have to be born white. And it doesn't really matter how hard a person works, they can never work hard enough to change their race. Okay, third, privilege is a right or entitlement related to preferred status. So, whatever is preferred in your society is going to have a privilege attached to it. So, say your society prefers young people to the elderly because they think young people can function more and can do more. So, that would give young people privilege in that society, whereas elderly people wouldn't have the same privilege. Privilege is exercised for the benefit of some to the exclusion or detriment of others. Okay, here's where it starts to get real. So, privilege doesn't sound like a bad thing. I mean, who wouldn't want to have certain privileges, right? But unfortunately, privilege comes at the expense or exclusion or even oppression of other people. So take male privilege. It allows for women to make 76 cents to every dollar that a man of equal education or an experience can make simply because of their sex, which is not something that you can easily change. A privileged status is often outside the awareness of the person who has it. Now, for me, this is the most important and often ignored component of privilege. It's not only dangerous to those who are oppressed because of it, but it's also dangerous to those who are privileged, those who are unaware of the part that they might play in this oppression. And I believe the best way to look at privilege is by taking an intersectional approach. That is to look at privilege in many different social categories that interact and depend on each other. So, before I go further, let me give you some information on the intersectional approach. Okay, so before you get too confused, basically intersectionality is looking at everything at once. So if we only look at class, we're missing a lot of other privileged and oppressed groups in our society. So think about being at an intersection getting ready to cross the street. You never just look one way before you cross the street because you might get hit by a car coming from the other way, right? So if you're having a discussion about healthcare, why would you only have a discussion about class and how much people have and how much they make and not look at gender or race, which also have a little bit to do with how much people are allowed to make? So it's important to examine privilege through an intersectional lens. I mean, to look at how these group identities may affect and influence each other in our social system. So these privileges have a habit of affecting laws and social policies, as well as the simple way we treat other human beings in our society. There are many more social groups and privileges than I have time for in this presentation, so I'm only going to touch on four. What I'd like to do now is show you a list of some social privileges so you can get an idea of what I mean when I say privileges that are just given to someone because of their group identity. Again, these lists were not created by me. These lists were created by authors who belong to the social groups that are considered privileged in some way in our society. So these lists are incomplete. Of course, they do not list every privilege for everyone. That would take forever. And um, it is a little succinct, but it will give you an idea of what it means to be privileged in each group and offer a beginning for discussion. So these authors are listing things that they can usually count on without having to consciously think about them in their personal daily lives. I'm going to start with male privilege.